The most dangerous words in the room were the ones everyone else heard as a compliment. Only I saw the death threat. My hands froze mid-sign, the polite corporate jargon I'd been interpreting for the Seoul boardroom crumbling into a silent scream. The Korean mafia boss at the head of the table was smiling, thanking his new partners. But in sign language, the subtle shift in his posture, the specific flick of his wrist I just mirrored, didn't mean gratitude. It was a promise to bury them. I am a certified deaf interpreter. My job is to be a perfect, invisible conduit. But in that frozen second, a professional oath collided with a human one. Do I finish the sign for prosperous future he actually uttered, or do I sign the murderous intent my eyes just decoded? The wrong choice starts a war. The right choice might end my career. My name is Amara Jones. I became an interpreter not just to translate words, but to build bridges where silence had been a wall. But the agency's email was clear: high-profile, multinational logistics firm in Seoul, one-day contract, non-disclosure agreement mandatory. They didn't say the firm was a front. I landed at Incheon Airport with my grandmother's words in my head. Your eyes will see what ears miss. That is not a gift, it's a responsibility. I'm 32 from Chicago and I've been deaf since birth. ASL is my first language. For high-stakes assignments, I work as a certified deaf interpreter. That means I don't just translate from spoken English to sign. I work from a hearing interpreter's signs, refining the message for cultural clarity and linguistic precision. I catch nuance they might miss. It's a team of two, creating one perfect conduit. The car took me to the Gangnam district, to a tower of blue glass that cut into the sky. The lobby was all silent marble and security with earpieces. My hearing interpreter for the day was a man named Minjun, nervous, fresh out of certification. It's just a quarterly review, he signed to me in the elevator. Standard corporate presentation for foreign investors. But his hands were shaky. The air felt thick, like before a storm. The boardroom was a glass cage on the 48th floor. A table of polished black wood, 16 chairs, a view of the Han River that felt less like scenery and more like a display of power. The men who filed in war-tailored suits and careful smiles, Korean, Japanese, 2 Americans, and at the head the man who would later smile his death threat, Chairman Park. In his 50s, hair slicked back, a watch that probably cost more than my graduate degree. He didn't look like a mob boss. He looked like a banker, which, according to my later research, he technically was. The meeting began. Minjun voiced their Korean into spoken English for me, and I watched his signs. My job was to ensure the meaning, not just the words, was clear for any deaf stakeholder, though I saw none. I was a redundancy, a premium failsafe. PowerPoint slides flickered. Logistics flows, port authorities, tonnage, profit margins. It was numbingly normal. But here's the thing about sign language. It's not just hands. It's the body, the shoulders, the tilt of the head, the eyes. In ASL, a raised eyebrow can turn a statement into a question. A tightened jaw can signal sarcasm or threat. And as I watched Chairman Park speak through Minjun's interpretation, I saw a disconnect. His spoken words, via Minjun, were about mutual benefit and shared ambition. But Chairman Park's own posture, the subtle, almost imperceptible tightening around his eyes when he looked at the Japanese investors, told a different story. It was the faintest sneer, buried under a corporate grin. During a coffee break, I pulled Minjun aside. His tone, I signed, "Are you conveying the sharpness? It feels layered." Minjun looked pale. My job is to interpret the words, just the words. He was scared. I realized then he knew exactly who these people were. He was following the professional code to the letter: accuracy, neutrality, confidentiality. Don't get involved. Don't interpret subtext, just be a mirror. We reconvened. The discussion turned to a disputed shipping route, a warehouse in Busan. The Japanese investor, a Mr. Tanaka, pressed a point about contractual safety guarantees. Chairman Park leaned back, steepled his fingers. His smile never wavered. He began to speak. Minjun voiced it smoothly. "Of course, your concerns are noted, Tanaka-san. Your safety and the safety of your assets is our highest priority. We look forward to a long and prosperous future together." But as Park said the word future, his left hand, resting below the table's edge, moved. Just a slight, deliberate turn of the wrist. A casual gesture to anyone else. But in the grammar of Korean Sign Language, a language I'd studied for 6 months before this assignment, that specific wrist flick, combined with the tight, non-moving smile on his face, modifies a sign. It doesn't mean future. It means ending. It means grave. My blood went cold. Minjun had signed the correct English concept, future. He'd voiced the correct English words. He had done his job perfectly, and in doing so, he had completely sanitized the message. I was the only person in that room who saw both versions, the polite spoken lie and the silent, signed truth. A death threat delivered in plain sight, hidden inside a compliment. The ethical rulebook screamed in my head: confidentiality, neutrality, do not alter the message, do not become a participant. My hands hovered in the air, caught between the sign for prosperous and a paralysis of conscience. The entire boardroom was looking at the chairman, then at Mr. Tanaka, then at me, waiting for the translation to conclude. Tanaka smiled, nodding, believing he'd been reassured. Chairman Park's eyes slid to me. For less than a second, they held mine. It wasn't a question, it was an assessment, a cold, calculating check to see if the deaf woman in the corner, the professional ghost, had understood the real message. In that glance, I knew two things. He knew I knew, and if I signed the lie, I became complicit. If I signed the truth, I would shatter the room and paint a target on my own back. I took a breath. My grandmother's voice was louder than the ethics textbook. I moved my hands, but I didn't sign the word future. I signed the truth. My hands formed the signs for ending and grave with a sharp, final movement. I didn't voice it. I didn't have to. Every deaf person watching the stream, and there were 3 on the international team dialed in remotely, saw it. The room didn't explode, it froze. For 3 seconds, there was only the hum of the climate control. Chairman Park's smile solidified into a mask. Mr. Tanaka, still smiling politely, glanced at his own assistant, who was frantically checking his tablet, then back at me, confused. Minjun, the hearing interpreter, stared at my hands in pure horror. He knew I'd broken protocol. He knew I'd just declared war. Then the Korean executive to Park's right, a man with a scar above his eyebrow, leaned over and whispered something. Park's eyes never left me. He gave a microscopic nod. The meeting continued as if I'd said nothing, but the atmosphere had curdled. The discussion became clipped, formal. The deal was tabled. 10 minutes later, it was over. People stood, shook hands with a new, brittle stiffness, and filed out. No one looked at me. Minjun practically dragged me into the elevator. His hands flew. What did you do? Do you know who that is? You just signed your own. He couldn't finish the sign. He just pointed downward toward the ground. He quit on the spot in the lobby, leaving me alone with the agency driver. My phone buzzed with a notification from the video conferencing platform. A private message from one of the remote deaf attendees, a German logistics VP named Klaus. His message was 2 signs captured in a quick video. Thank you, WITHDOAWING, our bid. He'd understood. He'd seen the threat and pulled his company's millions out of the deal. My interpretation had worked. It had also made me a liability. Back at my hotel, the fear set in. Not a panicked fear, but a cold, procedural one. I reviewed the code of professional conduct. Tenet 1, confidentiality. Tenet 2, impartiality. I had violated both. By interpreting subtext the hearing interpreter missed, I had taken sides. I had participated. My certification could be revoked. My career was over, but that wasn't the real problem. The real problem arrived at 7 p.m. A knock on my hotel room door. Not security. 2 men in suits, different from the boardroom. Calm, polite. Ms. Jones, Chairman Park appreciates your nuanced work today. He requests a debriefing to ensure no misunderstanding remains. It wasn't a request. A black sedan was idling downstairs. This was the escalation, the quiet pull into the back room. I had 2 choices: go and try to talk my way out, or refuse and guarantee a more violent extraction. I thought of my grandmother. When they come politely, she'd said, it means they still think you can be controlled. I went. The sedan didn't go back to the blue glass tower. It went to a traditional Hanok house in a secluded, wealthy neighborhood. Inside, it was all dark wood and silence. Chairman Park sat on a floor cushion, pouring tea. He was alone. The suit was gone, replaced with a simple linen shirt. He looked like a philosopher. He gestured for me to sit. You have remarkable eyes, Ms. Jones, he said through a new interpreter, an older woman who stood rigidly in the corner. Her signs were flawless, icy. You saw beyond the words. That is a rare skill, a dangerous one. I kept my hands still in my lap. I wouldn't sign. I wouldn't give him my language in this space. I spoke aloud, my voice uneven. My job is accuracy. Is it? He sipped his tea. Your job is facilitation. You facilitated confusion today. Mr. Tanaka is now concerned. His investors are nervous. This costs me money. He placed the cup down softly. The body is a language. You read mine. I can read yours. You are afraid. You are also principled. This is a volatile combination. He slid a document across the low table. It was a contract for full-time, exclusive employment, a salary 5 times my current rate, a non-disclosure agreement so comprehensive it would silence me for life. I need someone with your eyes on my team to ensure my international communications are precisely conveyed, no more misunderstandings. It was a bribe, a gilded cage, an offer to become the interpreter for his empire, to sanitize his threats into business deals for the rest of my career. To look the other way, the ethical breach would become my job description. I looked at the contract. I looked at the interpreter in the corner, her face a blank slate. I wondered how many misunderstandings she had clarified over the years. And if I say no, I asked. He didn't smile. Then you return to America, and you will find that your interpretive lapse today has been reported to all the relevant boards, the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf, the National Association of the Deaf. Your reputation will be ash. No agency will touch you. That is, of course, the best-case scenario. The unspoken alternative hung in the air, scented of pine and expensive tea. I stood up. My knees felt weak. I need time to consider. You have until your flight tomorrow, he said. The driver will take you back. The ride to the hotel was silent, but when I got to my room, I found the first sign that the best-case scenario was already in motion. An email from my agency. Urgent. Concerns regarding professional conduct. Contract terminated. Pending review. Attached was a formal complaint from the corporate client, alleging I had injected personal bias and caused material discord. But here's the thing, they made a mistake. They'd used my work email, and on my work laptop, I had a backup of the entire meeting's video feed, including the split screen with Minjun's interpretation and my own signs. It was automatic cloud storage, a CYA protocol. I had the evidence. The clear, time-stamped video of Chairman Park's gesture, my accurate translation, and the immediate, panicked reaction of his lieutenant. I couldn't go to the Korean police. Park's influence was obvious. I couldn't go to the American embassy with a story about a scary sign, but I had one contact. Klaus, the German VP. I sent him a secure message. I have proof the threat was real. Can you connect me to someone who isn't afraid? His reply came an hour later, a name and a signal number. Journalist, investigates organized crime in Asian shipping. He will understand. I called. The man who answered, a Korean reporter named Seo, listened quietly. When I described the wrist flick, he interrupted. That's a known signature. They call it the Park in Hyung, the Park Promise. It's not just a threat. It's a specific warning that a deal has been breached and retribution is coming. You didn't just interpret a threat, Ms. Jones. You decoded a contract hit. My discovery had just escalated from a professional breach to a potential murder investigation. Seo asked for the video. I hesitated. Sending it was crossing a line from which there was no return. It was leaking confidential work product. It was witness testimony. I sent it. What happened next was a quiet earthquake. Seo didn't publish a story. He took the video to a contact in the Korean Financial Intelligence Unit. Because Mr. Tanaka's company was publicly traded, a death threat from a business partner constituted serious securities fraud and market manipulation. It was a financial crime, not just a gangster's whisper. 2 days later, my flight was cancelled. A polite officer from the Korean National Police met me in the hotel lobby, not to arrest me, to ask me to stay. You are a material witness, Ms. Jones. Your testimony is required. Chairman Park's offer of a gilded cage had just evaporated. I was now in the custody of a state that was, at best, ambivalent about taking on a man like him. They put me in a safe house, a small apartment with a view of a different part of Seoul. I was told to wait. A week passed, then a package arrived, no return address. Inside was a burner phone. It rang once. I answered. You have good friends for a tourist. The voice was Chairman Parks, no interpreter. He was speaking directly, his English heavily accented but clear. But friends are not always shields. The financial police are a nuisance. They will find me. They will not bury me. You, however, you have become a symbol, a loose end that speaks with its hands. Symbols need to be retired. The line went dead. The threat was now explicit, direct, and in a language everyone could understand. The safe house didn't feel safe anymore. I looked at the police officer stationed outside my door. Was he protection, or was he Park's man? I had trusted the system, and the system had handed me a burner phone from the devil himself. That's when I realized the true pivot. This was never about one meeting. It was a test. My ability to see the hidden meaning didn't make me a threat to one deal. It made me a threat to his entire way of doing business, a business built on double meanings and public lies. He couldn't bribe me into silence because I'd already proven I wouldn't stay silent. So there was only one option left. The knock on the door came at midnight. It wasn't the officer. It was CEO, the journalist, his face pale under the hallway light. "We have to go, now, they're moving you, it's not the police." I didn't grab my suitcase. I grabbed my laptop, the hard drive with the video, and my passport. CEO's car was an unremarkable Hyundai. We didn't speak for 20 minutes, winding through side streets until the city lights blurred. "The officer at your door," he finally said, "was paid to look the other way. They were coming for you in an hour." He took me to another safe house, this one belonging to a source deep in the fishing district, a small, damp room above a closed noodle shop. "We have until morning," CEO said. "Then we move again, but we need to talk about what you really saw." He opened his own laptop. On the screen were photographs, documents, shipping manifests. "Park Min-sik," CEO said. "Chairman Park, he doesn't run a logistics firm. He runs a filtration system. His company washes money, legitimizes smuggling routes, and provides legal cover for the Jeongjeong Saja, the cleaners, a cell of the Jinseongpa syndicate. That meeting wasn't about a partnership. It was a warning to Tanaka to stop investigating 3 missing container ships. Ships that didn't carry electronics, they carried people. The "it gets worse" moment landed like a physical blow. This wasn't corporate espionage. It was human trafficking. My accurate interpretation hadn't just exposed a financial threat, I'd exposed a snuff film wrapped in a business deal. CEO pointed to a grainy photo of a man in a dockworker's uniform. "This is Lee Jae-hun. He was a whistleblower inside Park's Busan port operation. He was going to testify about the ships. 2 weeks before the hearing, he was in a hit and run. The police ruled it an accident, but a street camera caught the license plate. It was registered to a shell company. The board member who signed for that company was in your meeting, the man with the scar." The pieces locked together with a terrible, logical click. The death threat I'd interpreted wasn't a future possibility. It was a standard operating procedure. Park had given the same Park promise to Lee Jae-hun before he died. I hadn't predicted a crime. I'd translated a repeating pattern. "My video," I signed, my hands trembling now from cold, not fear. "Is it enough? For the financial police, maybe a fine for this?" CEO gestured at the photos of the ships. "No, it's a gesture, a hearsay nuance. We need the language that connects the gesture to the act. We need the written order, the ledger, the communication where Park spells it out." But here's the thing about people like Park. They're careful, they don't write things down. They use codes, intermediaries, and implied understanding. Their whole power is built on plausible deniability. I'd pierced that deniability once, in real time, through a language they didn't think I spoke. To do it again, we'd need to get inside. That's when CEO revealed his real plan. Park's head of international relations is leaving for a medical conference in Singapore tomorrow. His name is Choi. He's the one who negotiates with the Japanese, the Indonesians, the Russians. He's also paranoid. He brings his own interpreter everywhere. That interpreter just had a severe, last-minute family emergency. I made the call an hour ago. The agency is scrambling for a replacement with top-level clearance. He looked at me. "You still have an active profile with the agency. Your certification is under review, but not revoked. And you have a unique skill none of their other pool interpreters have." "Certified deaf interpreter," I whispered, "for a hearing man." Choi has a degenerative condition. He's losing his hearing. Rapidly, he hides it, uses hearing aids and lip reading. but in noisy places or for delicate negotiations, he needs a direct visual feed. He uses a CDI to interpret from a voice translation into clear sign. He reads sign language fluently. It's his secret accommodation. The pivot was staggering. They wanted me to walk back into the lion's den, not as a bystander, but as a spy, to interpret for the very man who executed Park's will, to use my dangerous skill to listen, to watch, for the connections CO needed. If you're caught, CO said, not unkindly, they will kill you, not with a promise, with a knife in a Singapore alley, and I will not be able to protect you. I thought of Lee Jai-hun, the dock worker. I thought of the missing container ships. I thought of my grandmother's words about responsibility. The ethical breach that could end my career was now the only tool that might stop a machine far worse. I nodded. What's the play? The next 36 hours were a blur of controlled panic. CO's tech contact gave me glasses with a micro camera. The lens was in the hinge, pointing forward. A 16GB storage chip, activated by a triple blink. A DK pair was placed in my bag. My agency, desperate to placate a furious client, leapt at my volunteering for the last-minute Singapore job. To them, it was damage control. To Park's people, it was a test. I was flown to Singapore on a separate ticket from Mr. Choi. We met at the hotel. Choi was in his 50s, impeccably dressed, with the calm, weary air of a diplomat. His eyes were sharp, missing nothing. His interpreter, a hearing woman named Soo-yeon, would voice for him. My job was to take her spoken Korean translation and render it into precise, conceptual sign for Choi to read. The first meeting was at a private club, all dark leather and low lights. The client was a Malaysian shipping magnate. The discussion was dry, port fees, customs delays. Choi spoke softly, his voice even. Soo-yeon voiced, I signed. I was a perfect, invisible machine. Choi watched my hands with intense focus, occasionally nodding. I saw him relax just a fraction. I had passed the first test. But in the cab back, Choi turned to me. He spoke aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. Park said you have good eyes. Tell me, what did you see in there? It was another test, a trap. If I said nothing, I'd be lying and he'd know. If I said something, I'd be presumptuous. I kept my face neutral, signing my reply for Soo-yeon to voice. The Malaysian man rubs his thumb and forefinger when he lies about the port fees. His accountant, the one who didn't speak, checked his phone 7 times. He's waiting for a number to greenlight the bribe you haven't explicitly offered. Choi stared at me, then he let out a single, soft laugh. Good eyes, he repeated. Tomorrow's meeting is more nuanced. Be ready. The nuanced meeting was in a hotel suite the next afternoon. The client was Russian. There were no papers, just tea and a chess set up between them. They spoke in English, a language Choi understood but pretended to struggle with for tactical delay. Soo-yeon whispered Korean translations to me. I signed them to Choi. The conversation was a masterpiece of implication. They discussed chess strategies, historical battles, the durability of Soviet-era machinery. To any listener, it was 2 bored businessmen killing time. But the metaphors were the message. The knight must sometimes sacrifice itself to open a file for the queen, the Russian said. Choi responded, but only if the rook is already compromised. They were talking about the missing ships, the whistleblower Lee Jai-hun, and a potential sacrifice to draw out investigators. My hands moved, translating the metaphors literally. Knight sacrifice, open file for queen. Choi's eyes tracked the signs, his face a mask, but then the Russian made a gesture. He moved his bishop diagonally across the board, then tapped the side of his nose. A casual, meaningless fidget to anyone else. But in the lexicon of international sign, a pidgin used at global deaf events, that specific tap on the nose, following a diagonal move, can mean smuggle or hidden path. It wasn't Korean Sign Language, it was a global slang, and in that moment I understood. The Russian wasn't just using spoken metaphor. He was signing subtly to Choi. They had a back channel, a visual code within the spoken one. Choi saw me see it. My hands had hesitated for a fraction of a second. His eyes flicked to mine. The room went very quiet. The Russian followed Choi's gaze to me. I completed the sign for compromised rook, my heart hammering against my ribs. The meeting ended with a handshake. In the elevator down, Choi was silent. Back in his hotel room, he dismissed Soo-yeon. He turned to me, speaking aloud. The nose tap, you recognized it. I nodded, not signing. It is a private joke between us, he said, his voice dangerously soft. From university, you are very observant, too observant. He walked to the minibar, poured a whiskey. Park wants you silenced. He believes you are a liability. I argued that a tool is not a liability if it is properly used. Today you proved me right. And also, he took a sip, you proved him right. You cannot unsee what you see. He put the glass down. I have a proposal. You work for me, exclusively. You see everything and you tell only me what it means. The pay is exceptional. The alternative is that I call Park and tell him you have seen our private language. What is your choice? It was the bribe again, but from a different angle, from the man who actually did the work. The intellectual to Park's brute force. To accept was to become the interpreter for the devil's conscience. To refuse was death. I thought of the camera in my glasses. I had recorded the entire chess conversation. The metaphors, the nose tap. I had evidence, but it was locked in a device on my face. I needed to get it to CEO. I need time, I said, my voice hoarse. You have until my flight tomorrow, Choi said. Same as Park, some clocks are universal. He left for dinner. I was alone in my room, the weight of the glasses unbearable. I couldn't transmit the data, it was physical storage only. I had to get it out. CEO was in Singapore, but we had no meeting planned. A dead drop, the old-fashioned way. I went to the hotel business center, printed a random document. In the hallway, I slipped the glasses case containing the real pair into the housekeeping cart of a maid who was not a maid, a woman who gave me the briefest of nods. The decoy pair remained with me. An hour later, my hotel phone rang. It was CEO, his voice tight. The data is clear, the nose tap is new, but the chess metaphors match wiretap transcripts we have from a tapped phone in Busan. You've connected the Russian to the operation. It's enough for an international warrant, but Choi is right. You're out of time. You need to extract. Now. How? I asked. Go to the airport, now. A ticket will be waiting at the Korean Air counter. Don't go back to your room. I grabbed my purse with the DK glasses and my passport. I didn't call the front desk. I took the stairs down 12 floors and slipped out a service entrance. A taxi got me to Changi Airport in 20 minutes. But at the Korean Air desk, there was no ticket. The agent looked confused, then concerned. She made a call. Her expression changed. Ms. Jones, please wait with security. There is an issue with your documentation. 2 airport security officers approached. Not police, private security. Their uniforms had a small, familiar logo, the insignia of Park's logistics firm. They had anticipated CEO's move. They owned the ground crew contract for half the airport. I was being detained not by a state, but by a corporation. In the liminal, international space of an airport, their authority was vague but very real. They escorted me to a private office in the back of Terminal 3. No windows. The door locked behind me. Choi was waiting. He held up the glasses case from the housekeeping cart. It was empty. A good attempt, he said, but the maid has been on our payroll for years. You have nothing, and now you are nowhere. He leaned forward. The offer is revoked. Park's original solution stands. You are a symbol that must be retired. But because I am a practical man, I will give you one final choice. You can disappear into our system. You will interpret for us in a room with no windows forever, or you can disappear into the Singapore Strait. Which will it be? This was the end of Act 2. The trap had been sprung. All my skill, all my courage had led to a locked room and a choice between slavery and death. The video evidence was gone. My escape was blocked. I had run out of moves. I looked at Choi, at his calm, expectant face. I thought of the one thing he hadn't taken, the one piece of evidence that wasn't on the glasses, that I carried in the one place they'd never think to look. I took a breath, and I began to sign, not to him, to the empty air, a detailed, meticulous account of everything I'd seen and heard, from the first wrist flick to the chess metaphors, using the full grammar of ASL. I was bearing witness, aloud and in visual language, to an empty room. Choi stared, confused, then amused. Who are you signing to? There is no one here. I finished my testimony. I looked at the ceiling. at the smoke detector in the corner, and I said the words that would turn my surrender into a weapon that would bridge this locked room to the final public act. "You're right," I said. "There's no one here, but there's a live feed to the International Association of Conference Interpreters Ethics Review Board, and you just confessed to everything on it." For 5 full seconds, Choi's face didn't change. Then, like a crack spreading through ice, the calm shattered. He lunged for the smoke detector. It was too late. The feed wasn't just being recorded. A live alert had been sent to the IACI's crisis response team the moment my heart rate spiked 2 hours ago. They'd heard everything, and they'd called Interpol. The door to the office burst open, not with airport security, with Singapore Police Force officers and 2 men in plain clothes carrying badges from the Corrupt Practices Investigation Bureau. Choi was restrained, read his rights in 3 languages. He looked at me not with anger, but with a kind of cold, professional disappointment. I had used the system's own rules against him. The fallout was not a single explosion, but a chain reaction. The live audio-video feed, paired with the chess metaphor analysis CEO had already provided to journalists, became the key that unlocked multiple investigations. In Seoul, the Financial Intelligence Unit raided Park's Blue Glass Tower with warrants for securities fraud and conspiracy. In Busan, port authorities impounded 4 ships owned by his shell companies. The cleaners syndicate, exposed, began to fracture, with lower-level members scrambling for plea deals. But the real damage was to the system of plausible deniability. You cannot deny a gesture when a certified interpreter has explained its meaning to a global ethics board. You cannot claim a metaphor is innocent when it matches the vernacular of a human trafficking operation. The Park Promise was entered into evidence as a linguistic fingerprint. Chairman Park was arrested at the Hanok Asterisk House, still sipping tea. The news footage showed him led away in handcuffs, his linen shirt rumpled, his face a mask of fury. The narrative in the media flipped overnight. The violent African-made story from the original transcript found its parallel. I was no longer a rogue interpreter. I was a whistleblower. The comment sections filled with new words. Hero, brave. She saw what no one else could. My professional reckoning came 2 weeks later, back in the United States. A virtual hearing with the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf Ethics Board. They reviewed the full context, the initial violation, the threats, the coercion, the live feed. Their ruling was unprecedented. My actions, they stated, while a technical breach of neutrality, were undertaken to prevent imminent and severe criminal acts. My certification was not only reinstated, but I was commended for upholding the deeper spirit of the code, to facilitate true understanding, even when such understanding exposes danger. The very skill that made me a threat to Park made me a landmark case in interpreter ethics. CEO published his investigation, winning awards. The German VP, Klaus, offered me a permanent consultancy to audit his company's high-stakes communications for non-verbal risk. I turned it down. Because the surprising detail, the one few people know, is what happened to the tool itself. The glasses. The IACI's tech team analyzed the design. They realized the lens could be adapted, not for spying, for protection. I now work with them and with a coalition of deaf tech developers to design a new kind of interpreter-assistive device. A discrete tool that can provide real-time, confidential alerts to an interpreter in crisis, linking directly to legal and ethical support. We are turning the weapon they used to trap me into a shield for others. I visited Seoul one last time 6 months later, not for a trial. The cases are still winding through courts. I went to see Yun-Jae, the professor from the original story, the woman whose maid fought for her. We met in a cafe by the Han River. She's out of the penthouse, teaching again part-time, her voice strong. We didn't talk about Park or Choi. We talked about language, about the weight of words and the heavier weight of silence. She signed to me, her hands graceful and sure. "You didn't just translate a threat," she said. "You translated a system's weakness, and in doing so, you gave the words back to the rest of us." The final loop closed not in a courtroom, but in a quiet email. From Min Jun, the hearing interpreter who quit in the lobby that first day. He wrote, "I was scared into silence. You were scared into speaking. I am returning to school to become a certified deaf interpreter. I want to learn to see what you see." So what happens to a woman who reads the hidden language of power and speaks it aloud? She doesn't get a palace or a parade. She gets her quiet career back, now with a permanent footnote. She gets a project that might make the next person like her a little safer. She gets to sleep at night knowing that 3 missing container ships were found, and the people inside were freed because a wrist flick in a boardroom was finally understood. The mafia boss's friendly words contained a death threat, and a deaf black sign language interpreter, using her hands and her conscience, translated that threat into a life sentence for him and a new language of accountability for everyone else. They told me my job was to be an invisible conduit, but some messages aren't meant to pass through quietly. Some messages are meant to be seen, to be held up to the light, and to change everything they touch. My grandmother was right. These strong hands, they're not for holding people up. They're for holding the truth up, so even those who refuse to hear it can't help but see. So what does this story leave us with? Not just a tale of one interpreter in one boardroom, but a question about all the rooms we sit in every day. The conference calls, the meetings, the conversations where what is said and what is meant dance just out of sync. We live in a world built on coded language, corporate promises that mask layoffs, political speeches that veil intentions, the gentle letdown that really means never. We rely on interpreters of all kinds, journalists, artists, activists, and yes, sign language interpreters, to translate not just words, but power, to show us the shape of the silence between the lines. Amara Jones's story exposes a simple, dangerous truth. The greatest threat to any corrupt system isn't a louder voice. It's a better translator, someone who can take the hidden grammar of abuse and make it legible to everyone. She didn't need a weapon, she needed a lexicon, and she found it in the language of her own hands. But here, the lingering question. If a deaf woman in a room full of hearing people can become the most dangerous person there just by telling the truth, what does that say about our own capacity to see and speak? What hidden languages are we ignoring because we've been taught they're not our business? The shrug of a colleague, the overly careful email, the joke that isn't funny, these are all dialects of a deeper story. The promise of this story isn't that we'll all become code breakers. It's that we might start to question the translations we're given, to look for the wrist flick in the handshake, to listen for the whisper in the applause, to understand that sometimes the person who seems to be on the margins, the interpreter, the assistant, the quiet observer, holds the clearest view of the center. Amara went back to work. The boardrooms are quieter now, or maybe she just hears them more clearly. The project with the IACI continues, and somewhere, a young deaf child is learning that her hands don't just communicate, they can decipher, they can defend, they can change the course of a river by namming the current. We are all, in some way, interpreters of the worlds we move through. The question is what we choose to do with what we understand. Do we pass the message along exactly as given, preserving the comfortable lie? Or do we have the courage to sign the dangerous truth, knowing it might cost us everything, but might also set someone free? Stay curious, stay sharp, and never underestimate the quiet person in the corner watching everyone's hands. If you want more stories that pull back the curtain on the hidden languages of power, make sure to subscribe. Because the next time the truth is hiding in plain sight, I want you to be the one who sees it.